Want to play a horror video game?
I wasn't ready.
Welcome to the Videogame Workshop. And on today's podcast, we are going to talk about horror video games. You can find us on Substack, on Blue Sky, or on Patreon. Like and subscribe if you like what we're talking about today. I'm Dennis Ramirez.
I'm Charlie.
All right, let's get to it. So, want to play a scary video game?
No, is the answer.
Not your favorite genre, huh?
No, I mean, I have a lot of respect for like the horror genre, both in movies and in games and like scary things, whatever. It's just not my personal favorite. I'm a bit of a wimp. I don't know. I like thriller and anticipation. I even like scary concepts, but I don't like just pop out at you scary, like just bodily reactions to things
Mm,
being the main driver, or like, yeah, like gross out. Like the reason why I'm watching this is because it makes my body feel super averse to this, or because like I'm jumping, like my heart rate's elevated. It's like I like the more psychological aspect of it. I find that a lot of horror games have both, but the presence of one makes it so hard for me to play that I don't want the other one.
that's true. That's true for sure. There is a difference, like you mentioned, between horror and terror and sort of like their relationship, right? Like one of them is a pre sort of reveal and all that sort of stuff. The terror, it's the anticipation, the dread sort of leading up to it. And the other thing is the horror after having seen what you saw and your reactions to it. And I kind of agree with you. I'm more on the terror side of things. I think that that's a little bit more fun and like a funhouse sort of way and
A
like a roller
thriller,
coaster.
yeah.
Yeah. Instead of like the other one where like you see a body or you see gore and stuff like that, that doesn't really do it for me either because it's almost like all of that is you kind of know what's going on at that point, and I think it's way more scary not to know what's going on that moment before that, and it's more interesting to me for that reason.
So, but even though you feel that way, I think you've played more games that you could classify as horror than I have.
Yeah, I like horror movies. I used to watch them a lot more. Less now that I have kids and stuff like that, but I used to watch them way, way more. My brother and I used to watch them a lot. You know, things like Alien, things like Friday the 13th, they're all super fun. I like that anticipation. I like that adrenaline. And I think just like games too, it allows you to experience something that is a little bit outside of your comfort zone, something that you normally wouldn't do, but is completely safe at the end of the day, right? Like that's kind of the appeal for me. Just that exploration, that excuse to explore like these topics or scenarios that otherwise you would never ever do. So that's kind of fun for me. And on a video game side of things, it's just kind of like an extension of that. You know, I love video games, obviously. So it's an interesting thing to go to a horror video game and sort of say like, you know, you watch a protagonist and it's always fun to be like, oh no, don't go in there. Oh, don't touch that sort of thing. But what happens when you're in the driver's seat, right? Like, do you make the same mistakes? Do you make the same sort of tropes? Obviously because it's a game, you might push your luck a little bit more. You might go back, you might make some calculated risks that you normally wouldn't. So that's fun for me to explore. And I do like exploring that not just in video games, but like in board games and novels and all that sort of stuff. But it's always interesting to me the difference, right? Because in a movie, you kind of have to watch helplessly as things happen. But in a game, you can do something about it. And that leads to unexpected, I think, emergent dynamics, emergent interactions that normally wouldn't happen in those horror movies. And it's interesting to me because I feel like it's really hard to get genuinely scared when you're in that situation because you have that autonomy and because sometimes what happens and sometimes what you do, just like in real life, is completely unexpected and sometimes crosses that thin line between horror and comedy and just completely goes off the rails to like, oh, that was really, really funny and it wasn't supposed to be.
Mm. That's interesting that you think that when you're in the driver's seat, of the horror movie that's happening because 'cause you're playing this game, that it makes you less scared. Because I definitely feel way more scared when I'm
Yeah.
in the driver's seat. I don't know, I feel like for me, it's not so much like, "Oh, the movie is passive, it's happening to that person." So it's, like, kind of disconnected, like, I'm watching it and I'm scared for that person, whatever, but, like, I can pause it and turn it off, it's fine. But it's like, when I'm playing the game, I feel like everything's happening because of my choices, and I need to make the right choices and do the right thing and
Reactions.
react in the right way, and so it's, like, even more anxiety for me producing that I'm driving it. It's not,
Hmm.
although I will say, like, it is totally true that sometimes adding your own elements like that into that horror genre can make it cross that line into comedy.
Yeah.
I think, that's a really big part of why horror games are so big on streaming and having Let's Plays and follow-alongs, because not only is it fun to watch someone have a really big emotion and get scared and scream, whatever, but also because it can be very funny if you're disconnected. Like, if you're watching someone do something really stupid or get mauled by this wolf or, like, whatever, and you're not in it, you're not immersed at all, it's like it can be very funny from the outside.
Yeah, that's true. I actually think that that's a really good point. Like, I've tried to make horror games myself, and I know the plight of like the horror movie that really tries to go for it and is ends up being really campy or really like B grade, like Evil Dead, that sort of thing, where it's like they set out to make the scariest sort of thing, and at the end of the day, it's like, oh, those trees are attacking you or something like that. That's kind of funny, actually. Like that sort of thing. So I appreciate that. I think that's part of the reason why I look at games with that sort of lens and why, like, when I'm in the driver's seat, it's less scary because it's very hard to set up a jump scare for, like, in a video game, right? And not telegraph that it's coming without making it feel cheap or something. But importantly, I think there's a lot less uncertainty in some cases if you don't do it correctly, where the horror or the terror leading up to it kind of evaporates. So here's an example. I think, like, when you're watching a movie, you don't know when they're going to run out of bullets. You don't know when they're going to run out of like the thing that could have saved them for that round or whatever. But in a game, generally, you want to be fair. So you have your HUD or you have your inventory, and you know exactly how many bullets, how many heals you have, all that sort of stuff. And I feel like that ability to plan for it takes away from some of that terror, some of that anticipation, and some of that dread. You can plan way, way more than if it was uncertain in that sort of situation. I will say though that I have played some horror games that I do find more on the scary sort of side of things, and I've noticed that in those situations, almost always they have some sort of mechanic that makes that uncertainty, like that ratchets that uncertainty up, like. Maybe your gun has a percentage probability to jam, so even though you know how much ammo you have, you don't know when it's going to jam, right? But again, it's one of those things where it's like people hate weapons that can break. People hate weapons that have durability, and it's because they feel like they don't have control. You're taking away agency from it, and I feel like that's kind of where like horror games come to a head with like good game design because you want to be able to empower the player. But here's a situation where you actually want to do the counter of it. You want to make them feel like they're not the star at in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think that it's true where you want a player to feel like they have control and like they're making a plan. I like the way you said, like, you can plan everything out. I think the cool thing about horror is that, like, the plan going wrong is, like, a very important part of it, and, like, a horror protagonist is planning, right? Like, it's not like, "Oh, they looked down and they didn't have enough bullets, and they just hadn't ever thought of that as a possibility." It's that something went wrong in their plan, and so, like, you
Yeah.
have to make a plan in order for the plan to go wrong. How you make that plan go wrong as the game designer kind of makes it feel either good or bad, but having the player plan it in the first place is definitely an important component.
Well, I mean, and back to that point too, it's like there's so many different play styles, and being able to design for the different play styles is also super hard when you want to set up that moment, right? Because there's going to be like some people who play it with a type A personality that are like let me open up my spreadsheet and see how much ammo I got or something, or like there's going to be some people who sort of metagame it, right? And that's really hard too. It's almost like reading a synopsis before you go into the movie, right? Like you anticipate some of the stuff that you're not supposed to anticipate. So it's kind of hard on that, and that's another reason why I'm saying like it's really hard to get that into that headspace for it. So even though it's like unfair or uncertain, the mechanics, I feel like those events that you can't plan for, whether it's like the gun jamming or random events, are really successful in this sort of place. So tell me about a game that you played in this sort of genre. What did you like about it? What did you think was interesting?
So I haven't played too many games like this myself. I have watched my brother play a lot of these games, which is playing the game, but like
Yeah.
in this genre in particular, I think it's important to note that I'm not holding the controller because I wouldn't have made it far through the game or would have like experienced much less of the game if I had been the one who had to hold the controller.
Wait a minute. You played like 999, right? Doesn't that kind of fall into this sort of thing?
Me and my brother played 999, but it's like a text-based, like you just
Hmm.
click the next button to read the text and you like see cutscenes happen. There's nothing that's like real time. There's no like quick reactions to
Yeah.
anything. I can play games that have quick reactions and I can play fighting games. Maybe not my favorite, but like I can play them and have played them. But when you add in the anxiety element to it, then I just like get worse and worse at it and start freaking out and then I don't want to play it anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So I guess one example, we've brought this up many times before, but Alien is a fantastic horror movie. I love that movie. I think it's a great example of the difference between, like a thriller and a horror. It's so much anticipation and shot for shot perfect movie. Like it's beautiful. And then they made a game out of it, Alien Isolation. And we've talked about
They
how
finally
cool,
made a good game out of it though, because they've made a lot of games.
really,
Oh yeah,
I only
yeah. I mean, like, Colonial Marines, like Alien versus Predator, the old one was really good, but that's kind of an issue, and I think we're gonna get to it, right? Like, there are reasons why like Alien Isolation is so good, and I would say out of all the Alien games that are out there, it's probably the one that gets closest to the vibe of the actual Alien movie, or at least the original Alien movie, the core of what you think when you think like Alien Xenomorph sort of thing. That's not a coincidence.
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoyed that game because there was so much like planning, anticipating, testing your luck.
Hmm.
How far do I want to run before I get to the next save point? How far do I want to like push this? Do I have enough flamethrower to get through this section and like be confident in it? It was just a lot of like bargaining and being worried about it and deciding whether or not it was worth it and going for it, which to me is really fun, especially compared to a different type of horror game where I feel like there's a lot more in your face confrontation. Maybe I'll say like there's still a lot of thriller, but just a lot more like it's going to happen versus like it's happening right now.
Right.
Um,
So, like you were saying, in Alien Isolation, you kind of have to plan, right? Like you have to, it's you against this unstoppable sort of thing. And I think that that's so good because it goes back to the core of what made the original Alien so terrifying. Whereas Aliens, on the other hand, brought in like the Marines and brought in like, let's shoot it, let's shoot our problems away, that sort of thing. And it's interesting that like most of the games that came out after that kind of followed in that footstep because it's easier to translate that into a video game. We already have a template for that, right? There are some games out there that look like they should be in the horror genre, like Doom, but aren't. And part of the reason is because of this like agency that we're talking about, right? So when you bring in Marines and when you have guns and when you can shoot the xenomorphs and basically have like unlimited ammo, or you have some sort of promise that with the right weapon, you can beat the aliens, they become way less terrifying, right? And that wasn't the case in the original Alien. In the original Alien, they were space truckers, basically, right? And they found this thing that they weren't supposed to mess with, and they did. Well, all except for the woman that no one listened to, which turned out to be the only survivor at the end, right? That's the same sort of situation that you want to be in when you want to evoke terror. You want to be the smart person in the room, taking it seriously and actually treating this threat for what it is. It's a big threat. And in order to do that in a video game, you have to take away a lot of the verbs and a lot of the actions that normally you would want in that type of genre. Like, you don't want to give too many shotguns. You don't want to give too many flamethrowers. And in this case, what they do so well in Alien Isolation is it's all improvised. So it's not like you were planning on coming face to face with this thing. It just so happened, and you had to survive by like your own grit. You had to survive by making do with what you had and going head to head with this thing, which is really cool.
So then I have a question for you. So there's a lot of action adventure games, I guess I would call them, that have horror elements in them, partially because they like bring in the supernatural or because they have like some sort of like monster in them that you're
Yeah.
fighting and it's supposed to be really scary or really overwhelming. I'm thinking about Uncharted has kind of something like that, the end of the first one, I think, and Tomb Raider, the newer one,
Hmm.
has like kind of a supernatural element that gets kind of spooky. And I mean, even The Last of Us is a zombie game, right? But I wouldn't call it a horror game, right? Like I said, I would call it like an action adventure. But when you bring up a game like Resident Evil, like Resi 4, something like that, people would be much more likely to call that a horror game than like an action adventure game, even though you're playing as like an FBI agent who's going after zombies and shooting them and blowing them up and stuff. And
Yeah.
so, if you're talking about, oh, this just happened to them, they didn't go out looking for it. But then if you can play as this FBI agent who's literally going out looking for them, but that's more horror, how is that, different than maybe like an action adventure game where it's like
Right.
Last of Us is literally post-apocalyptic zombies, but it feels less horror than Resident Evil does.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of arguable too. Like, you can
Definitely.
have a good argument on that because I think like for me, Last of Us definitely is more on the side of like terror horror movie, like classic zombie
Really?
movie, yeah, than like Resident Evil 4 for me. So the developers of Resident Evil 4 had a hard time with this very thing that we're talking about because what they wanted to do was they wanted to change the format that they had originally with like the first three Resident Evils, and they wanted to do something different, right? Like it had been getting stale, which is something that happens with a lot of horror too, right? In part because you knew what to expect. Like nothing was really a surprise anymore, which again, like we've talked about surprise in the past, but like the jump scares weren't landing as hard because you knew that they were zombies. So they had to change that up, and they did in Resident Evil 4 with Las Plagas, right? Like instead. But one thing during development is they were having such a hard time with that, and they were trying to shake up the format to be more modern, to be more action oriented. But every time they added action components to it, it took away some of the horror. It took away some of the terror because Leon was too good at pushing them back. So they didn't feel like a threat anymore. They just felt like fodder, like something that you had to go through. They tried adding some supernatural elements that weren't originally in the original Resident Evils, and that didn't work too because it was too much of a tonal shift. It was kind of like the Friday the 13th movie where they go into space, where it's like, yeah, that's new, but like not in the way that you want it to be. Like it didn't mesh up quite well with the world that they wanted. So what ended up happening is that they actually split it into two different games. They made the first Devil May Cry and Resident Evil 4. So they kind of split that. And you can kind of see like a lot of their initial inclinations of what they wanted to do end up in the in Devil May Cry and the Devil May Cry series with Dante. And then you can see where they started to like pull back on some of that stuff with Resident Evil 4. So one of the things that they ended up doing, right, is like you still have to hold still when you have to shoot, because that is a drawback that you have for having that firepower. They're not going to give you like the full on combo sort of thing, which they did in later games in the series, but like at least then they still wanted you planted in the floor, and they kind of couched it in the, well, you're a professional, you have to line up your shot, you're not just going to like run and gun and that sort of thing, right? They also had their toolbox of like scarcity, right? Which is one thing that I think Resident Evil 4 and The Last of Us kind of share in that, for different reasons. They make it so that the things that you can collect and the things that you can use are very scarce. So you're still in that sort of predicament of, I could survive this if I had the right gear, but I don't have the right gear. So how do I survive with suboptimal situations?
Interesting. I didn't know that those two split, and
Yeah.
that's that's super interesting. Devil May Cry is another game that I hadn't considered uh as like a horror game.
Right. It's action. It's pure action with like horror
Right.
elements, right? Yeah.
Maybe part of the reason why I don't consider some games horror games and I do consider other ones is purely aesthetic based, especially if I haven't played
Hmm.
them myself. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, Resident Evil 4 is a horror game because look at how grimy it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's all grimy and scary. And then like you play like a different game, like I even said, like Last of Us. I was like, yeah, it's a zombie game, but it's not really a horror game. And you're like, yes, it is. And I'm like, oh, but it's not. Like it's pretty, you know.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, aesthetics can get you super far. Like we talked about how like cozy
Does
isn't
it?
really a genre, right? Like it's an aesthetic, but that's
Yeah.
another whole can of worms there.
Does it look like it could be in Hot Topic? Is my question.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see like Last of Us living happily in Urban Outfitters, not necessarily like Hot Topic, but I think like that loss aversion and scarcity thing is definitely something that like you can find in a lot of horror games. And if you look at like from a mechanic lens, what makes something feel more horror or terror, at least to me, it's right smack in that uncertainty of like, you don't know when you're going to get your next power up. You don't know when you're going to get your next save. So you better do well. You better be careful, especially in most of the games that like limit saves, because you don't know how far you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to replay it. It's a very real world consequence for your actions that actually matter. And because of that, it triggers that loss aversion. It triggers that like sense of dread that you might not be able to get the outcome you want.
Yeah, definitely. I think loss aversion, push your luck type mechanics, it's just huge in anything that's like supposed to be giving you any feeling of anxiety, whether it's in a horror game or not. Like, if you're worried about losing something, or if you're worried about like getting hit and you're not sure and you're teetering back and forth on your decision, like that's going to be great in a horror game and in any game that has horror elements to it. Any sort of like put it out, like take a chance on something. Like Among Us online
Hmm.
game, like Friendswap original game, like great game. It's kind of doing The Thing, the movie The Thing, right? Which is great horror
Yeah.
movie. It's like one of us is the thing and we don't know
Yeah.
which one. And it's like, ooh, we got to take our chances and I'm not sure. And you have to live in this unsure zone. And it's like, Among Us isn't a horror game,
Right.
right? Is
Right.
it? But I mean, like, oh, they're all alone on a space station. And, it's like, it's doing the thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that there's a lot of other games that do it. I'm sure you could come up with a whole bunch of examples. I mean, even games like Papers, Please, which we talk about all the time. It's like that's not a horror game, but you have to live in that anxiety feeling all the time, and you have to
Hmm.
constantly be pushing your luck and how much can I get away with before I get caught. It's just that anxiety element of decision making, I think, is really important, not even just in the is something outside going to get me, but like, am I going to be doing too much?
Right. Right. The consequences of your actions, right? Like that sort of thing. And I think it's interesting that you brought up like the multiplayer like friend sort of thing too, because that's interesting. Like there's a reason why if you want to like watch a scary movie, it's more fun with friends, right? And it's also one of those things that like even good horror can be deflated by like friends making comments or cracking jokes and all that sort of stuff, right? Like, there's a reason why there's so many parodies after the fact of like The Ring. Oh yeah, like girl looks like she's having a bad day, just crawling around, bad hair, that sort of thing, like in the moment with your friends, that can deflate the situation so quickly. And games like us, right, have that social component, and they also bring in that history that you have with other people on it, right? So even if like Remy was the thing in here, it's kind of funny at the end of the day because they played on the tropes and
Mhm.
jokes and all that sort of stuff, right?
When I was younger, Slender Man was a thing,
Yeah,
and, it's like there were, like, 5 of us crowded around someone's computer in the basement trying to play this
yeah,
game and, like, freaking ourselves out so bad, like, 2 seconds into the game that we were all, like,
yeah.
hyperventilating, right? And it's like, that was just silly, but, I mean, it's still happening, right? Like, Lethal Company was
Hmm.
huge. That's, like, a horror game and also kind of like a friend slap game, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's great. It's a great game, but it's definitely supposed to be a horror game. um, Even Peak, climb a mountain with your friends. Like, if there's horror elements in
yeah,
that
yeah.
game. I won't spoil, but like I said, streaming, even if you can't actually play multiplayer, like I don't know anything about Subnautica, but I have seen very funny clips on TikTok of someone turning around and there being like a fish monster directly in their face and they like freak out
Right,
about
right.
it. I think Dead by Daylight is like one of the most streamed things on Twitch or something. I've seen clips of it. I don't even know who any of the monsters are because I haven't even seen a lot of those movies, but I know like that you can play as them and I've seen
Yeah.
it. I've seen people be really, really good at it. So it definitely lends itself not only to kind of like group big emotion from like actual fear, but like you said, it's kind of like being in on the joke,
Hmm.
right? Like you get to watch the scary movie with your friends and also laugh at the scary movie because you're not the one who's like active in it. Or if you are the one who's active in it, you get to kind of like glance at the camera, like thumbs up, like, oh, I'm in
Right.
a scary movie. Like you get to be really self aware about the fact that you're in a scary movie, which can be fun.
Yeah. One of the things that I think was actually a really, really well executed horror game, but also solidly fits into that like streamer friendly, like really funny sort of thing is actually Five Nights at Freddy's. I think it's
Mm.
really, really good for what it does. It does super smart stuff in terms of like the mechanics, in terms of what we said about like limiting some of the player verbs and actions, having those unscripted and uncontrolled elements pop in, things that you can't really do. It has some loss aversion and some resource management at the very least, with your battery life and what you're going to choose to use it for, whether you're going to power the doors or where you want to go, right? Like, does a lot of cool stuff on that. And it's also super funny to see people just completely lose it when like an animatronic thing pops up on the screen.
Yeah, that's an interesting example because it's like that is a scary game, a horror game that was streamed so much and became so popular for the comedic stream
Right.
reactions to
Yeah.
the horror that it became a children's property.
Right. Right. Right.
Like,
Right.
you know how weird it is that you can release a horror game and like people have so much fun watching other people be scared that it like breaks the children's barrier and now you can buy a backpack with like Five Nights at Freddy's on it
Right.
and they
Right.
made like a like movie out of it and like little kids know what it is. That's crazy.
I know. I know. And exactly that, because like the reaction videos for it are so, so good. Right.
Right, it's not famous for being, like, a fantastic horror game. It's famous
Yeah.
for being, like, funny that it's a good horror game. You know what I mean? Like, there's kind
Yes.
of the nuance that it's like, if it weren't funny, it wouldn't be this popular.
Someone's going to have to lore check me on this, but I'm pretty sure. But if I get something wrong, make sure to put it down in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. So, what's really funny about like the Five Nights at Freddy thing is it's very well done in that they knew their limitations and they knew how to execute on it. But I think the funniest thing about that is that one of their limitations they found out was that they're not so good at 3D modeling, because apparently the developer originally was trying to make 3D models for like a Christian site or a Christian game, and people were like, this is at the level of uncanny valley where it's unsettling, and I do not like it. And so, like, most people might hear that feedback and be like, well, that's it for me. Thank you for your time. But no, like, this guy instead was like, well, like, if I make them kind of unsettling, maybe I just lean into that and I just make it into a horror franchise, and the rest is history. The same sort of thing with like some of the mechanics that they did. Once they figured out that they were going the horror route, they weren't going to do action because they obviously couldn't rig a human to like in a believable 3D model. So there goes the first person perspective, right? And like you can see some of the design decisions sort of flow from that. And they did it so well because they played to their strengths and they knew what kind of experience they wanted it to be, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's so funny.
I know.
Love a flexible, like fast-paced, agile work environment, right?
Right,
Like
right.
they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
but seriously, I love like
Write
deving,
that down.
right? Like I love deving with that purpose where it's like you don't start out with like an extremely detailed game design document and like you try to execute it perfectly, but it's like you build, and as you're building, you kind of lean into what you've got. It's so great. I love to
Yeah.
hear stories like that with limitations.
So the original Resident Evil had tank controls. The tank controls sucked. Well, guess what? It's probably on purpose because they had to do that for the camera angles to get them exactly right,
The
so
fixed
that the view
camera.
exactly, so that the view would be exactly how they wanted, like on a movie, basically like on a horror movie, right? Like you can just kind of see around the corner but you can't move the camera, so there's that dread of what are you going to do. And so that makes it great for the jump scare, like you mentioned, of like the zombie dogs popping out at you suddenly, right? It makes it land, and they couldn't do that
Right.
without
I
impeding
can't see
controls.
around the corner. And then it's like, oh, well, we don't want you to see around the corner because we want you to get around the corner. And then it's like a
Right.
built-in jump scare. I never thought about that. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or like limited resources, or like in Silent Hill 2 you're really bad at combat. Well, that's on purpose so that you can't just like run into battle. You can't move while you shoot. Well, that's on purpose because there's zombies all around you. There might be one behind you, and you have to make that calculus in your head about like, do I take the shot or do I keep running, that sort of deal. So
Hmm. Silent Hill, that's the one where, I mean, they have the fog, right?
mhm,
All throughout the
yeah,
town, which is another cool, like, game design element that became like a horror element, right? Like, it's like,
which is
this is a really big town, actually, and we can't have you walking all over, and we can't preload that many
yeah.
assets. And so we're going to put just like, it just kind of hazes away. And it's like now, like, the fog is like a huge part of not only that game, but like the series, right?
Another good example of like playing to your strengths, right? Because like the draw distance fog, like you said, heck, it even shows up in like the Superman 64, not in a good way in that game, but in this one, absolutely, because you don't know what's around the corner. And like you said, it became a mainstay. That's also super terrible because on the remaster that they did for Xbox, they were like, oh, the hardware's so much better now. We don't need the fog. And so they took the fog out. So
They've
like
had a
everybody's like,
fundamental
what?
misunderstanding.
Yeah, yeah. There was definitely a disconnect. They were probably like, yeah, we got this optimized. It's great. Like, and good for them. Like, awesome. But that was necessary. It was a style choice that they built around. So yeah. Have you heard of PT, the Hideo game, Kojima
No.
Productions? No? Awesome. So so when they were going to reboot like Silent Hill, right? They had to make a demo. So they had like Kojima and Guillermo del Toro kind of working together. And so they dropped the demo and they just named it like PT. and no one knew what it was. It just kind of showed up one time. They started playing through it. I think it's really, really good, and I don't think I'm alone in that. People kind of say it's like one of the better horror games in the past decade because of that like lore and history and all that stuff around it. The fact that it just dropped and no explanation did a lot of the tropes, horror tropes really, really well. Zero to like absolutely no combat, but did the whole like unexpected sort of thing. You're basically walking down a hallway forever and ever and ever, but it does it so well. It's funny to hear about it, right? And what's interesting too is that like they pulled it off of the PlayStation Store. This is where it gets into like the urban legend sort of thing. So only if you downloaded it on a PS3 are you going to be able, or PS4, um, are you going to be able to play it today? And actually, I have one. I have a PS4 and I have PT on it, so we can actually play it. But it's one of those things where it's like, I love the
Don't ever
fact that
update your console and yeah.
yeah, but it also like looped itself around into like, there's a legend and there's like videos of it, but like my friend's friend, like they still have a console to play it and we're gonna play it tonight or whatever, right? Like it still has that like mystique around it. So it's pretty cool in that way.
That is cool. I have heard about like a Silent Hill game that didn't come out that only some people have. I just didn't. Why is it called PT?
It was because it was called playable trailer for the new Silent Hill.
Oh,
Yeah, so they just named it like PT, but they didn't, you know, I guess they just like released it. They didn't spend too long on that. Got some like stock footage of like a tree trunk or whatever and just kind of stuck PT and like weird writing on it. That's it. Yeah.
works.
Yep.
And what happened to it? Why didn't it finish production?
Oh man, that's a whole other story. But basically, like Kojima and Sony like had a huge falling out, led to his own like him creating his own studio, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So the project was like completely scrubbed. And I think except for like the most recent Silent Hill F, there was a long period of time where no one really did anything with the property. It was like super toxic because people loved the playable trailer and it was short enough. It's perfect in that like the length was good, the buzz around it was good. Now it has this mystique around it. And because you never actually finish the game, you can never disappoint anybody, right? It's always going to live in this infamy of like, if we got the full game, it would have been the best game ever because everybody inserts like their whole like, what they wanted it to be. And they can never be wrong because it will never be made.
Yeah.
Kind of like the George R. R. Martin books.
Yeah, that would be really difficult to try to
Yeah.
do. I'm sure that the Alan Wake team was feeling that with Alan Wake 2 to
Hmm.
extent. I mean, it comes out all these years afterwards and everybody's been waiting for this sequel forever and they have to make it. I'm sure it's a lot of pressure. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, same with, Alien Isolation, trying to
Yeah.
make a game out of that movie or any of that stuff. I'm sure it was really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
There's a lot of games that have played with things like limitations or played with like the fact that they're games, right? Like they try to use the medium specifically or try to use standard game mechanics in a new way to comment on horror or to play with horror. I mean, similarly to like the way that horror movies do, they like play on tropes or like they play on like unreliable narrator in a movie. Like it's like they're trying to subvert and play with it, but a lot of games and horror games that I can think of that have like played with the fact that you are playing a game to up the horror. I'm thinking about like Immortality is probably like the best recent game that I would call horror that I can play, but I really can't even talk about it because to talk about it would be to like give too much away. I think you should really experience it. But one game that does this that I know we've both talked about is Until Dawn. They really wanted to play with the fact that they were a game a little bit more than some other games of that time period that also were doing motion capture and using like real actors and doing a lot of cutscenes. And it was kind of clear that they just wanted to be a movie. Like they were like, we wanted to make this movie, but we work in games, and so we're going to make a game, but it's like mostly action things and then cutscenes because really what we wanted to do is make a movie. Until Dawn did a better job of like they wanted it to be a game, not a movie. And they did make a movie out of it, but it's kind of unrelated, right? Like it's not even like
Right.
the same thing. So I played Until Dawn a long time ago, and I mostly watched my brother play it, like I said, so I don't remember it so much, but I do know that they did a lot of stuff with player choice, branching. They did kind of this cool thing at the start where they asked you questions about what you found was scary, and then they would
Oh yeah.
swap out assets. Like, are you scared of bugs or spiders? And then later on, they would just like switch out the asset for what's crawling around on the screen to from like a cockroach to like a spider, depending on what you picked. It's like, okay, is that like the most innovative thing? Like, maybe not, but at the time, it was cool. And also, like, it's incorporating in a new way of like personalizing horror, which is something that you can't do in a movie. So I think that that's kind of cool. But I know you've played this before too, Dennis. You like this game, right?
Oh yeah, I think it's one of my favorite. When we talk about adaptations, and we were talking about adaptations in a previous one, right? Like link down in the description too for that. But I'm
Stop.
chilling out hard today. Yeah. Okay. But really, I think Until Dawn translating the slasher movie into a game in a good way. One of the critiques I've always had about kind of linear story games, one of my narrative teachers who worked on God of War described this as like the type of storytelling of a snake eating gerbils, which is basically like it's big, thin, big, that sort of thing. And
Gross.
so I know, very gross, but it's a Halloween episode. What are you going to do, right? But yeah, the idea behind that, right, is like you make a choice, but really we're going to get you back into that same spot because we want to hit that specific beat. You know, the Telltale game got away with this. The Walking Dead Telltale game got away with this because it had such a good story. But really, like those branches kind of converged back into the main story and hit the same beats because it's really hard to give space and then tell a very coherent story with those beats because you throw away so much of what could have been or this other branch and stuff like that. And I think
And
Until Dawn did a great job of avoiding that.
yeah, and to be like clear and fair, like neither of us are against like games that branch out and get back
No,
in,
no.
right? Like
The Walking
I think
Dead did a great job at that. Yeah.
yeah. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I don't like when people are like, "Oh, the choices don't even really matter at the end because I should be playing two entirely different games." Like, no. Like you could have a choice in a game that's purely about like showing a character's thought process and it ends up the same no matter which one you pick, but because the options were there, you understand what the character was deciding between. Like choices aren't just there to put you on separate paths, right? Like they can be used for a lot
Hmm.
of stuff. But I agree that if you're talking specifically about choices being there to give the player a sense of weight because of like dread, because of fear of the outcome of their choices, because it's like a horror game, then yeah, you do want them to feel like they're going to go in entirely different directions and you do want it to actually end up changing because if you, the player, know that no matter what you pick, you're going to end up with the same outcome, you do kind of lose some of the like, oh my God, like horror terror element of the game out of that choice.
Right. And that's what I think is so good about Until Dawn, because they avoid that through their very clever lives system, right? When you go in and you play it, you don't think that you have like lives or you don't think that you have like tries or anything like that, right? But you do. And they're actually the survivors that are in the story. So if you're playing through a level and you fail a quick time action, there are repercussions. They might not be immediate, but they might like break your character's leg. And then later on, they're going to kill off that character. So there is a consequence for that. And they do a good job of like not telling you who like the main protagonist is in terms of like giving them plot armor. And I think they do something really nice too, in that some of the survivors have very specific like bottle episodes, for lack of a better term, where they have their own sort of like side stories. So like if you have these two specific characters, they're going to have their own sort of thing, but they're not afraid to throw away beats, because if one of those survivors dies, they will cut that whole level and they won't let you play it, because the survivor is dead. And so you don't get to play that. I also think that it was very clever of them, like you said, it was very clever of them to do flashback sequences in a way that it was in like your psychiatrist or your therapist's office, where they're asking you questions, where really under the hood, what they're trying to do is they're trying to have you select some things that are going to pop up afterwards, but they hide it so well in the framing aspect of it
I
that it
mean,
doesn't feel, well, okay,
do they
well
though?
enough,
It's
well
not
enough is what
that
I'm
under
saying.
the hood.
But they lean into the tropes is what I'm trying to say.
Are
Yeah,
you
you're right.
afraid of spiders? Spider! Like, it's not that hidden.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's not super hidden, but what I'm saying is like within the genre, it's not, it's cohesive within the genre, because it's not like you wouldn't see this in Scream or Halloween or like a Friday the 13th, where they have a like psychiatrist sort of set up and they're asking the protagonist questions and somehow it pops up. Like it feels like you are the main character in that story. Which, like we said earlier, is really hard to get right. You know, you're here for a slasher flick, and it's okay that people die, and it's okay that that's actually a part of the system on the back end, because just like Five Nights at Freddy's, it kind of knows what it wants to be, and it's not trying to be more than that. It's just trying to execute well on what it's trying to deliver, which is really nice for that.
Have you played Heavy Rain?
No.
I don't know if it actually holds up. I played it when I was
Yeah. Yeah.
little with my brother, and I have feelings about that developer, I think. But I will say it did come out before Until Dawn, and they
Hmm.
also did a thing where they like had you play chapters between different characters, and your characters can die, and
Hmm.
then like you just don't play any of the chapters for that character anymore
Yeah.
past that point. So like I know that that has been done. I think Until Dawn did a really cool job of it. I know they're not the
Hmm.
first ones to do it,
Yeah.
but yeah, that game is also, I remember, kind of like a horror thriller game. There's this one part in the game where like you go and talk to somebody and like you're in a jewelry shop and like you have to wait for them to go get something and then come back and then talk to them, and then you find out that like the police are on their way and you have to like wipe down everything that you touch for fingerprints,
Yeah.
and it's like real in the game, and it's like, oh, what did I touch when I was waiting for this guy to come back,
Right.
and you
Right. Right. Right.
actually have to remember and wipe it all down. And like I was so upset when I was like, no, we touched that. Did we touch that? Did we touch that? But if like you take too long, then like they're gonna
Yeah.
get to you. And it's like, so I mean that's not even what we were talking about. I just remember that scene from that game. So they did a lot of horror anxiety, and they did do a lot of like overlapping character work the same way that kind of Until Dawn did. And you couldn't have done that necessarily in a movie. Like, you
Hmm.
could like switch back and forth and then have them show up in a unique way, or you could have it like all of a sudden one of them dies in a way that like you weren't expecting. We keep bringing up Scream, but you know, it's like Drew Barrymore, no, like she was on the poster, right? But still,
Yes. Yeah, those fake outs are great. Going back to like cutting off like a branching narrative storyline, I think it's so funny that they had that even in Westworld. That's one of my favorite scenes, where like the guy developing the world is like, oh, they're so close to like triggering this branch. I have this whole thing set out, and then they just shoot him. And then he's
if
like,
I
well, there goes.
if I was evil, I would be that man. Like, I felt such a kinship to him when I was watching that show. You were like, oh no, you gotta go watch Westworld, go watch it. And I came back like to work the next day and I was like, Dennis, I need to see the flowchart. I need the
Right.
spreadsheets. I need to see every
You need to
interaction
see the
point.
triggers. Yeah.
I need everything. Like, it would be so fun to make a Westworld style theme park with all of those individual triggers and branches and ways that they could go down and ways that they could
Right. Right.
interconnect. It's like insane, also horrible, but still.
Yes, yes, and maddening on just like an artistic level that, you know, that content might never ever be seen, but oh well.
Branching narrative and weight and stuff having choice like one mechanic that can make things scary. And we talked a little bit about like anything that's like push your luck or like being worried about like your resources can be
Hmm.
really scary and anxiety producing. And that works in a linear fashion too. It's not just nonlinear. We've kind of touched on we don't like pop ups, but like pop out scares have their place. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not I don't hate them so much that I just, like, staunchly against, "I'm close," but, like, I can understand them. Like, I think, a lot of people talked about in Alan Wake 2, the pop-ups. I don't know if you haven't played that, have you?
No, no. Yeah.
Like, the cool thing about those pop-ups in particular is that they are thematic, like, it's the dark presence. If you've played any Alan Wake, you understand, and, like, it does make sense for the character. It's not just a random pop-up, it's like a PTSD episode, like, it's happening in his brain, it makes sense for the thing, but, like, from the player perspective, like, I couldn't handle it. They did release a patch with, like, you could turn it up or down,
Mm-hmm.
but one thing that they did, they made it so, like, you can turn down the amount of pop-ups, but you can't turn them off. They still will happen, and, like, I think some people really didn't like that. I kinda respect it because I think it's kind of standing with, like, my game isn't for everyone,
Hmm.
which I'm always, in support of. Like, accessibility is one thing, yes, but, like, if it's a horror game and the pop-ups are to you a very important element of how you're telling this horror story and it's important to your character, then yeah, you can't turn them off because it's important and maybe some people won't be able to play, including me. And I'm okay with that. Like
Right.
I got through it just by having someone else play and like looking away and I hated it, but like it's fine. And like I wouldn't have played it if I didn't have someone else to play with, but that's fine. I like that they stuck to their guns with it at least. But yeah, pop-ups are another way that things can just be scary through that. And also like the gross out,
Right.
just making
Right.
things really gross. I
Right.
think those
Right.
are kind of like the four main ways that we've talked about to add some horror elements.
Yeah, for sure. I think another one that we kind of focused on was like that what makes a horror game versus what makes something that looks aesthetically horror and what's the difference between the two, like Devil May Cry versus Resident Evil 4, that sort of deal. So thank you for listening to us talk about horror games and mechanics in horror video games. If you had fun listening to us, you can subscribe to our channel. We are on Substack, we're on Patreon, we're on YouTube, and we hope you have a happy Halloween.